So, what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, you missed probably the best invitation to the offering ever, as Susan Maybe asked us if any of us going to a restaurant leave a tip. And when we leave a tip, do we leave 15, 20%? And as most people nodded and agreed that, of course, they left at least 15%, she reminded us that God's only asking for 10%. We were invited to consider the concept of tithing, not as something foreign and bizarre, but as a way of recognizing our commitment, a way of recognizing that our life flows into ministry, a way of taking our funds and unbinding them and letting them go. It was a wonderful invitation, and I think something for many of us to think about, whether we tithe or not, just to think about what we do with our money and how we share it. And in that theme of unbinding and letting go, that of course came from the story of Lazarus. We heard today from Ezekiel and the valley of dry bones, and the word of the preacher, the word of God bringing life to those dry bones. We heard from John's gospel and the story of Jesus coming to see Lazarus, his friend, whose death makes Jesus weep. And Jesus calls the once dead Lazarus out of the cave. And although dead for 4 days, Lazarus emerges from the cave, and Jesus says, unbind him and let him go. And it wasn't just listening to that story that was important, it was imagining, in fact, that it isn't about a moment in history, that it isn't about Lazarus, but in fact it's about me and you. And it's about all of us who feel dead even though we are alive, who feel bound, not by strips of grave cloth, but bound by judgment, bound by our history, bound by our overcommitment to things that don't really matter to us, bound by our grief and our sorrow, bound by our pain, bound by our fear. And just as Jesus weeps for Lazarus, God too weeps for us and invites us to come out of the dark, invites us out of the cave, invites us out of our pretend death and into real life, into a place where our worth is recognized by God. Our lives are defined by God. Our hopes and dreams are real because they are shared by God. We are invited to a time when we recognize that we are valued, loved, and that it's what we are going to do right now. It's what we are going to do next that will define us, not what we did yesterday or what we did a month before or what was done to us. And regardless of what we do in the next moment, we will still be children of God, still loved. And knowing that, living into that, surely that must be life. So I'm sorry that we missed you at Jubilee today, but spend a little time this week wondering about what it is that binds you, what it is that makes you feel dead even though you are alive. And then recognize that God is calling you out of that, out into life, vital life, where the arc of the universe may indeed be gradual, but it tends towards justice, invites us into beauty, invites us into life. God bless.